So let's talk about Islam. So let me begin with some general remarks about Islam as a religion. First of all, Islam is one of the largest religions in the world. Out of 7.5 approximately, 7.5 billion people who live on earth, about 2.2 billion people are Christian, and about 1.5 billion people are Muslim. So Islam is the second largest religion on earth. There are more Muslims than Catholics. In the world, there are about 1.3 billion Catholics and 1.5 billion Muslims. Islam is a religion that was conceived 6 centuries after Christianity. It is growing very rapidly. It is a world religion. Muslims live in all parts of the world. And in the West, there are two basic positions with regard to Islam. According to the first position, and this position is usually taken by Christian fundamentalists. So according to the first position, Islam is a militant religion. Muhammad is the false prophet. Muhammad was the first terrorist. The Quran is about violence and killing the infidels. The God of Islam, Allah, is not the same God as the God of Judaism and Christianity. And finally, the name of religion, Islam, is the word that means submission and obedience, and that's what Muslims want. To make everybody on this planet obedient to themselves. So that is the first position, and it's quite extreme. The arguments in favor of that position are usually taken from the Quran, and the Quran does provide some passages that are quite violent. Now, the second position is usually advocated by Christian liberals. According to Christian liberals, Islam is as good a religion as Christianity, as peaceful. Muhammad is not a terrorist, but is a military commander. He was engaged in military activities. He was a gifted military commander, but being at war is really different from being a terrorist. The God of Islam, Allah, is the same God. The same God that Jews worship and Christians worship. And finally, the word Islam means peace rather than submission. So these are two extreme positions that are often taken in the West with regard to Islam. And personally, I believe that both positions are oversimplifying this religion. Islam is a complex religion like all religions are. And it cannot be reduced either to its militant aspect or to its peaceful aspect. You can find some arguments for both positions. For example, for liberal positions, you can say that every chapter, every surah of the Quran begins with the opening prayer, Bismillah, which says, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. So you can say that the Quran promotes the same spiritual values that Christianity promotes. You can say that there are some passages in the Quran that are quite violent. However, you have to consider the Quran against the background of 7th century Arabia, when Islam was actually born, etc. There are arguments on both sides. My personal position is somewhere in the middle. However, if you compare Islam with Christianity and Buddhism, if we take those three world religions, we could definitely say that Buddhism is the most peaceful one, and Islam is most probably the most violent one, while Christianity is somewhere in the middle. And the main problem with Islam, as I see it, is quite simple. When the followers of any religion want to revitalize their religious life, want to revive the religious teaching, they usually come back to the roots of their religion and they look at the life of the founder. So when Buddhists want to come back to the roots of Buddhism and want to imitate the Buddha, they see a peaceful life of a religious teacher who for 40 years promoted his teaching, and practically no wars were initiated in the name of Buddhism. When a Christian person wants to come back to the roots of his or her religion, these people are looking at the example of Jesus, who lived a peaceful life. He taught only for 3 years, but he did not defend himself. He even forbade Peter to defend him with the sword. He did not talk about holy wars. So when Christians want to imitate their founder, most likely they will live a peaceful life. When Muslims do the same, when they want to come back to the roots of their religion, they come back to the example of Muhammad. And Muhammad, unlike the Buddha or Jesus, was not only the leader of his own religion, but was also a political leader of the Muslim community. As a political leader of the Muslim community, who lived in 7th century Arabia, he had to engage in wars because 7th century Arabia represented basically a tribal society in which tribes were at constant war with each other. And if someone attacks you, you have to defend yourself. According to the Muslim tradition, all of the wars conducted by Muhammad were defensive wars. And the community had to defend itself. But when Muslims come back to the life of Muhammad, they want to imitate the lifestyle of Muhammad. They come back to war, to jihad. And that's why all the movements at reform, at least most of the movements at reform in Islam, end up in jihad. So that is the problem for Islam, and we cannot escape this problem if we look at the history of religion.